Good morning. I'm Tom Griffin. I'm a regional sales manager of National Flooring Equipment, and today we're going to be talking about grinder tooling, specifically for service prep applications. A few weeks ago, Dave did a video where he talked about kind of a high overview of tooling and polishing process. Today we're really kind of getting into tooling by application. So the tooling that we're talking about today is going to primarily be for our Helix grinder and our 8274-4 grinder, but a lot of that tooling also has a bigger brother, so to speak, on our GP700 and GP3000 grinders. We do have a lot of tooling that we're going to cover, so I am going to refer to notes on and off just so that I don't forget to mention a specific tool for an application. A lot of this tooling is used for not only one application, but multiple applications. So I want to make sure that we're as thorough as we possibly can be. And we can actually start talking about tooling. There's a reason that we have so many different types of tools. Not every coating is laid down the same. Not every concrete is the same. You can have soft concrete down in Florida, super hard concrete in Houston, medium soft here in Denver, Colorado. You know, it's different everywhere. And so all of our tooling is geared so that you can use it for multiple applications and customize it to make sure that your tooling is being effective and you're being efficient on your job. So one of those things that we're talking about today is surface area on tooling. And this is going to be one of the big things that really makes your tooling effective or ineffective. So the less surface area that your tool has, the more aggressive it's going to be. So I'm going to talk as we go through applications. I'm going to show you multiple types of polycrystalline diamonds, and they're all the same build, but the way that we attach them to the tooling itself, the amount of surface area on them is really going to determine how aggressive that tooling is. And one of the great things too is that you can always start less aggressively with your tooling. You always want to think about what's coming next. What is your end goal for removing the coating or prepping the concrete? If all you're doing is removing paint and the customer really doesn't care about what it's going to look like later and all they're going to do is an overlay on top of it, then being more aggressive with your tooling and having some more speed is a great thing because nobody's going to care. But if you're doing a job where the guy wants to come in later and put down like a nice clear sealer, you're probably not going to want to go as aggressive as you possibly can be, because that sealer is only going to highlight all of the scratch marks that you put into the concrete when you removed the coating and did the surface prep. So always start a little bit less aggressively, because you can always get more aggressive. So if the tooling that's least aggressive isn't actually doing the work, then you can move into other areas and use other tools that are more aggressive until you find the right tool for the job. We can also talk about machine speed. The Helix has a high and a low speed. The 8274-4 has variable speed. So you have the ability to control how fast that tooling is moving. When you're doing a coatings removal, slower is better. It allows the tools to get into the work. It allows the carbide tipped anything to actually cut through the material and shave it off the floor. Otherwise, you could just be spinning your tooling straight on top of it, and if we're talking about diamonds, you're probably going to glaze them, and then you're kind of in for a little bit of a headache going on there. And we can also look at, especially here on our Helix, and this is something that sets the Helix apart from a lot of our competitors, is that you have the ability to do a passive planetary grind as well as a direct grind. Some of the tools that we're going to talk about today require a specific direction. They have to spin in a certain way to work. So if we were to put these little carbide chips on our passive planetary heads, they wouldn't do anything. So I will talk about where to put them on, especially the Helix. On the -4, which is a true planetary machine, you can attach them directly to the hubs. But there are other tools like our full bar diamonds and obviously our scarifier head that directionality doesn't matter. And I'll go over that when we get to the tools. So let's start with our first group of coatings, which is just heavy stock coatings. It's a really generic term for just thick coatings that are on the floor. And when we look at getting those off the floor, you need to be pretty aggressive to get into the work. So what we're going to be looking at for those jobs are going to be our polycrystalline diamonds. And those are PCDs. So those have a little bit of a diamond matrix embedded right on the tips of the tools, and that allows the tooling to cut straight through the material. These are directional tools. So on the helix, they have to be attached to the grind plate. On the dashboard, they can go on the actual planetary heads themselves because they're forced to spin in a specific direction. But this is where we're going to talk about the difference between aggressiveness on the half dome 2-up, which is the least aggressive PCD that we sell, down to the 2-up micro PCD, which has very little surface area. So you've got all of that head pressure of the grinder resting on just a few of these little tips that you can see on your screen in the previous shot. The tools aren't going to last very long because there's not a whole lot there, but they are really designed to be super aggressive and to really cut through that coating. So the next one we're going to talk about, we get a lot of questions on this, is adhesive. We're going to look at the same tooling there, because adhesive, you're still wanting to cut through what's on the floor. But a really good tip with that is you want to go slow. Adhesive plus heat equals smearing. So you really don't want to just smear the glue all over the floor, and nobody wants to deal with that. So going slow, using the right aggressive tool will actually cut it and peel it off the floor and allow your dust collector to suck it out and put it down into the Bongo pack. Get it off the floor. Another trick, especially with adhesives, is to have 2 sets of your tooling. One set of the tooling can be on the machine doing the work, and even going slow and even having the right tooling, they're still going to gum up. It's just what adhesive does. So having a solvent that's the proper solvent for that type of adhesive, you can put your tooling in there to dissolve a lot of that gumminess off of there. And then when what you're working with has gummed up, you can actually just switch them out. It's a really good way to keep your guys in the work and being efficient on the job site, so you're not just standing there for an hour waiting for the solvent to do its job. Also with the adhesive is our cutting head, our scarifier cutting head, and this has TSR teeth on it, and they look like crazy ninja stars, and they really just hammer and peel that adhesive off of the concrete. So I don't know if you can see a clear view of this. Nick's doing a great job of zooming in for me and focusing, but all of these little teeth are just going to repeatedly hit the concrete, and especially with adhesives, it'll peel it off. If you're removing a coating, it'll do the same thing, and it actually kind of leaves a nice light shot blast like appearance on the concrete. I don't recommend this for doing any sort of line striping removal, because on our grinders, these actually don't spin in a specific direction. So if you're trying to remove like a 4-inch line of something or a 4-inch line of glue or adhesive, it's not going to be very effective. Now, if it's paint, it's going to be great. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. The traditional method for removing glue too is looking at half bar diamonds. So if you're noticing that you don't really need to be aggressive, maybe it's not a super thick coating, so you want to go with the least aggressive method that you can, these half bar diamonds are going to be great for that, because it gives a lot of pressure per segment of the diamonds, but it also allows that diamond to scrape the glue off of the floor. Like I said, this is kind of the more traditional method, which doesn't make it bad. It's just a different alternative to try if the other ways aren't working. Or let's say the job doesn't justify spending the money on PCDs. PCDs are more expensive. So using diamonds, they're gonna last longer and they're gonna be a more cost-effective choice for when you're actually in work. The next one we're gonna do is thin set. Grinding down thin set is probably one of the easiest ways to remove it off of the floor. We've got some scrapers that can also remove thin set, but I was down in Louisiana and I thought my scraper was going to be able to remove the thin set no problem off of the ground, and I couldn't get it to do anything. I couldn't get it to stay in the work. And I actually called Dave, our director of international training, and said, Dave, I've done everything I know what to do. Why isn't this working? He goes, oh, yeah, down there they use an epoxy reinforced thin set, and that stuff is just a beast to get off the floor. The only way you're going to do it is with a carbide chip and grinding. And so, slightly less aggressive than the PCDs that we've been talking about. The carbide chip and has 4 different sides on it. So for ours, our carbide chip is just this little segment. And you actually get 2 of them per tooling holder. And I can talk about the tooling holder later so we understand its purpose. But as you're doing the work, if your cutting edge, which is just this leading part right here, starts to dull, you can actually unscrew these, turn them a quarter of a turn, bolt them back on, and now you actually can extend the life of these carbide chips because you're able to turn them 4 times, get a lot more life out of that. And having a sharp edge is really going to keep that tooling effective, especially when grinding down thin set. This is probably the most effective tool that we've got for removing thin set and still being cost effective. If you're coming up against that epoxy reinforced thin set and it's really not working, then I would recommend going to a PCD or a micro PCD and really working through that thin set, grinding it off the ground. Just to show how versatile this scarifier head is, this is really good for removing thin set off the ground. These teeth are just going to shred through it. When you pull off the tiles and you rip all the stuff that was adhered to the floor with that thin set, it's going to leave a lot of highs and lows and grooves, and these teeth are really going to grip into that and just shred through that material and really break it up. So it's a really effective way to remove thin set off the ground. Next part's epoxies. This is kind of one of those things where pretty much every tool we have is going to remove epoxy in some way, shape, or form. But you've got to consider how thick the epoxy is, what the next application is going to be, and how well bonded that epoxy is to the floor. If you're coming into a job and you're cleaning up somebody else's mistake where they really didn't do the surface prep correctly to start with, and they put down a thin layer of epoxy and it's completely delaminated from the surface, then you really don't need to be super aggressive because it's already coming off of the concrete. So all you want to do is use a diamond or maybe a carbide chip just to scrape it all off and really just open up that concrete so that you can get in there. But let's say it's a thicker epoxy coating and they actually really did do a good job putting it down and prepping the surface, then you would want to use more of a PCD that's really going to cut through that thick epoxy and allow you to get into the work. You can also use diamonds, again talking about just other options. If the job doesn't justify the price of carbide chips or PCDs, or our scarifier cutting head is a little more expensive up front, but the life of that is phenomenal. Even if it doesn't justify that, your traditional diamonds are going to do just fine. Whether we're talking about full bar diamond or some of our half bar diamonds, everyone's going to have a 16 grit, a 30 grit diamond in their toolkit. That's just the standard, I'm going to prep the surface diamond. So these guys are just fine for opening up epoxy. Now, if these don't do that, then you can go to the more aggressive methods and really shred through it. We've got another tool we haven't talked about yet, and it's kind of the most expensive per square foot and the most aggressive tooling we have. But if you've got a job where they needed it done yesterday because, let's say, the surface prep contractor that they had hired flaked out, now the job's behind schedule, or the whole thing is waiting on this one part to be done, brazed diamonds are a great way to surface prep and remove coatings from the floor. If you look here, you can see that compared to a traditional diamond, which the diamonds are embedded in the matrix and the matrix has to wear away to expose the diamonds, all of the diamonds on our brazed diamonds are exposed. It means they're really aggressive and they're really gonna rip through the material that's on the floor. So they're gonna be really efficient at doing what they do, but because all of the diamonds are exposed, they're not gonna last as long, but they really are gonna save a lot of time and really cut through that material. We offer two different styles of them. This is a 5-inch disc, and this is our trapezoidal. So this actually takes the same shape as our full bar diamonds. This allows you to get better into highs and lows. So if the concrete is pretty wavy and you're trying to get paint or something like that off, these brazed diamonds are going to be really effective, the trapezoidal ones, in getting down into those highs and lows and allowing the different edges of the head to do the work. If the concrete's pretty flat, these 5-inch discs are great. They're just going to shred through the material. Something that probably more abatement guys are going to come across, Mastics. And there are some really nasty ones out there, and I know not all of them are reinforced with some nasty stuff, but you know, the tool we recommend for Mastics is definitely the carbide chip. It's really just going to cut and shave that mastic off of concrete. You don't want to create a lot of dust with removing mastics, especially if there's a chance that they have asbestos in them. So using the right tool to just kind of cut and scrape that mastic off the floor is really going to be the best option for you. We're talking a lot about application, but what if you get on the job site and you don't know what's down? You don't know if it's an epoxy, you don't know if it's paint, it's so old, or there's multiple things down there, and it's just going to fall into a general category of coatings. You can definitely just try starting to scrape with your diamonds. Just try doing a full bar diamond. If those don't work, move to a half bar diamond. Half bar diamonds don't work, go to a carbide chip. If the carbide chips don't work, go to the PCBs. Any of those are bound to open up the surface and really cut through the material. So if you don't really know what's down, or if you think there's epoxy that's over paint, then it's okay to just kind of try different tooling and to throw different tools at what you're doing. Another great tool that we have, and it's going to look like a traditional full bar diamond, but this is our super seg. It's actually a 25 grit diamond that's set into a super soft matrix. And the matrix is just this metal glue that's holding all the diamonds in. Compared to our full bar diamonds, this only has one full bar. Our traditional ones also have a second bar right here. These diamonds are designed to be very aggressive. They're designed to wear away very quickly. They're designed to really open up the floor, to break that surface tension, to cut through the material. Because they're super soft, they're not going to last as long, but they are going to be very effective and they're going to do the job very well. If you're just breaking surface tension, you're just going to put some scratches in the floor to make your other diamonds more effective. But if you've got a really stubborn coating and you don't know what it is, using a super seg is a great way to test it out. And you can start with a super seg and just do a quick pass over the coatings and cut into it, and then come back with your full bars or your half bar diamonds. And those can actually, in combo, make your full bars or half bar diamonds a lot more effective because you're able to actually catch into that coating and to actually cut it off the floor more effectively. So sealers, heavy and light sealers. Again, we're going to be talking about our diamonds. As you're grinding, you might come across some gumminess on the floor. As you're ripping through that concrete, you're obviously going to be pulling off some of the surface, but you're also going to kind of notice a little bit of gumminess on the concrete. Definitely is an indication that there's a sealer in there. I would just recommend, if it's a pretty light sealer and you can get away with using your 30 grit diamonds, then do that. If your 30 grit diamonds aren't being effective, go down to a 16. If your 16 full bar diamonds aren't effective, then you could try doing a half bar diamond. In this situation, I don't recommend using any sort of PCD or any sort of carbide. They're just way too aggressive and they're going to shred the concrete to pieces. So that's why we're talking about, especially with sealers that are just in that top layer of the concrete, using your diamonds, because you're also going to be profiling that concrete at the same time when you're removing that sealer. A great time to talk about something that our marketing department didn't have time to make a nice image for, because I sprung it on them at the last minute, is using these pie-shaped transitional diamonds. I'm gonna try and do it without having them fall off of my hand. So what these do is they're less aggressive. There's a lot of surface area here. So if you've got a heavy sealer or you've got a light sealer on the floor, this might not be the right place to start for removing that. But let's say you're removing this old sealer, let's say something discolored, or maybe it was flaking, or the concrete was delaminating. There was some reason to remove it, and you really don't want to leave some aggressive lines in the floor that a 16 or a 30 grit might leave behind. These transitional pie-shaped diamonds are really great at smoothing out those cuts that you made when you removed the coating or removed the sealer. So what these do is they just really smooth out the concrete. And we start with a 30, and then we've got a 50, and we've got a 120. So if somebody really just wants their concrete to be cleaned up, and they really want it to be nice and smooth, and maybe at some point in the future they're going to come back in and put another maybe just clear coat or clear sealer down because they want it to be a little shiny, doing this process of removing the old coating and then smoothing out the concrete with these is a great option, especially if you get up into the 120s. It's almost going to look like a very light polish. It's not polishing concrete, but it's going to look like it, and still allow you to put down a sealer or something to kind of get that polish-like effect. For paint that's on the floor, we really recommend our 16 grit diamonds. We also have our half bars, which are 3, 12, and 16. Those are going to be great for it. I've also seen our scarifier head work really well at removing thin coating of paint off of the floor. This does it really effectively, but so does all of the other diamonds. And paint on the floor typically isn't going to be very thick, so using the diamonds is a very effective way to get through that paint. Let's just say you come across concrete that really has been mistreated. It started to delaminate, or there's a lot of patchwork that you need to remove just to get it off the floor and clean it up, or maybe the patch is failing and you need to get it out. Being aggressive with that is a really great time to use PCDs or to use our scarifier head. Those are really just going to rip through that material and just kind of take it off the floor in the most aggressive and efficient way possible. And something that we get a lot of questions about, especially when we're using diamonds, is glazed diamonds. So glazed diamonds happen because there's not enough of a rough surface to continually expose the diamonds. So the heat builds up and that friction actually just kind of melts the matrix and glazes the tools. It makes them completely ineffective. So now you're just spinning them over the concrete and they're not doing anything. Just because that's happened does not mean that you need to throw out your tools. There's a bunch of different ways to deglaze diamonds, and you can try all of them. I've heard of flow torches. I think the easiest way to do it is just to put some, especially if you're dry grinding, some silica sand down on the floor and run your diamonds through there, because you're creating enough of that aggressive friction that's going to actually reopen those diamonds. If you're wet grinding, these grinders are not really meant for wet grinding, but if you're using some of our bigger ones like our GP700, GP1000, you could actually put some water in with that silica sand, and that's going to keep the friction from building up and let that sand really aggressively open up those diamonds. If you're on a job site, you're noticing your diamonds are starting to glaze, but they haven't fully glazed yet, and you don't have sand or anything like that around, you can actually just kind of go from the work that you're doing, which is on the unground concrete, you can actually move the machine back and forth into and out of the already ground concrete, because that ground concrete is rough. And so it's going to kind of act like the silica sand that I just talked about, and it's going to help to open those diamonds back up and keep them glazing fully. Oh, that was a lot. Down at the bottom of your screen is our website address. It's got our phone number. National's got a lot of other guys that are way more knowledgeable than me. We've got people that cover, sorry for the helicopter in the background. I think they're preparing for fire season here in Colorado and running some drills with all of our great firefighting planes and helicopters. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. A lot of us have our phones on 24/7. We're here to help you. We want to make sure that you guys are able to use our machines effectively in the field, and we're really truly believing that service after the sale is what National's all about. If you've got any questions, I think we'll leave it open for a couple minutes or 10 seconds. But it was really great talking with everybody today. I hope you found this informative, and don't hesitate to reach out. All right, thanks everybody.